This is a quick sketch of Nami that I drew, brothers and sisters. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook if you'd like to see more artwork like this. Take it easy, nation. One Piece, Chapter 69, Arlong Park. Well, hello, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation. I, as always, am Jim, here to take you on a journey and bring you a review of the awesome and epic tale of One Piece. Our last chapter saw us wrapping up the Baratie arc and saw, well, let's see here. Just to kind of give a quick wrap up, Yosaku had gotten back to the Baratie and riding inside the mouth of a panda shark. He told Luffy he needs his help, that they know which direction Nami's headed to, where she's headed to, but he can't explain right now, but they need Luffy's strength. Sanji decides to join him, and Luffy and Sanji, and in a very touching moment as well, Sanji says his goodbyes. Red Leg, acknowledges him, and so do the other cooks, and they just, for a bunch of hard asses, they have a very touching moment. And then they go and set sail on a boat that Sanji has. So that's where we're left off. That's where we begin. And this was a really good one, I thought. It's kind of broken up into two parts. The first half of it is Yosaku and Luffy, and of course Sanji. And it's really the second half is us being introduced to where the next arc is, Arlong and Arlong Park. So without further ado, I guess we'll get into it now. So it starts out, and Luffy's talking about how, he can't wait to get to the Grand Line. Well, actually, it starts out with Yosaku. He's still crying and blubbering over the touching moment, and and they're kind of, Luffy and Sanji are kind of making fun of him. They're like, Jesus, are you ever going to stop that blubbering? And Sanji's like, can you even see to steer the ship with all the tears coming down your face? So then Luffy goes and he announces that he can't wait to go get Nami back and go sail to the Grand Line. And Sanji says, aren't we a little light? I mean, even with Nami, there's only 5 of us. We should have a bigger crew. I mean, the Grand Line is dangerous. It's treacherous. It's the sea doesn't give many second chances. And Luffy says, oh no, it's paradise. So we'll recruit more men when we get to the Grand Line. The Grand Line is like paradise. And they're like, what? Sanji's like, what are you talking about? And he goes, that's what Red Leg told me. He said, for some, the Grand Line is like paradise. So so Sanji's like, that old crap geezer told you that? And Yusaku's like, no, you're taking this too lightly, brothers. So he's like, so then Sanji says, okay, time to eat, And or maybe Luffy does, I don't know, one of the two. And Yosaku says, no, hold on a second, sit down, we need to talk first. So he sits down, sits them down, and he starts to give them a history lesson. And he's just like, the Grand Line is much tougher than you could possibly imagine. Even Brother Zoro would be, scared of it if he knew of some of the characters that were there and where we're going. And you don't understand, there's three treacherous, and we get a lot of information in this chapter about everything, because we wind up finding out that there is these 3 terrors of the sea. And the first one is the Seven Warlords, the Seven Pirate Warlords. And we find out that Hawkeye Mihawk was one of the 7 warlords. These 7 warlord pirates are basically the big badasses of the Grand Line, and they are recognized. They're recognized by the government. And basically, what happens is the government allows them to go and kind of rob and pillage, and steal from other pirates, and they give them a cut of it. So it's kind of like most governments today. So it's organized crime, but. So Luffy's just like, man, Hawkeye was one of them, and there's 6 more like him. Man, they gotta be pretty badass, right? And then Yosaku says, yeah, and one of them, Jimbei of the Fishmen, and he says Jimbei of the Fishmen. And I think I'm pronouncing that right, Jimbei or Jimbei. Jimbei, I think, is how it's pronounced, but that's what I'm gonna go with until somebody corrects me. So, Jimbei he basically he made a deal to become a warlord, and he more or less he released some kind of terror into the sea, and we don't really get, it's kind of vague. We don't get a whole lot of direct information about it. And then he says he releases a terror into the sea. Sanji and Luffy are sitting over there, and Luffy goes and holds up this drawing that he made of this that looks like a goldfish, right? And he's like, oh, like this? And he goes, can't you just be serious for once? and he's trying to explain about Jimbei, and then he goes and he says, and here's the thing is that we're going to Arlong Park, so we find out that's where our destination is. We're going to see Arlong. Arlong was once the equal of Jimbei, and we don't know what the backstory is or whatever, but he was once the equal of him, so we assume he's a fishman as well, or of the fishman race or tribe or whatever. And he says, well, how do you know? You turned halfway back. How do you know that that's where they're going? You know, when you basically came back to the Baratier when you were only halfway there. How do you know that's where they're going? And he said, me and Johnny have a hunch. Nami started acting really weird when some wanted posters fell on the deck, and she kept asking about them, and basically she asked about we told her she was looking at the Arlong one is what she was doing, the Arlong wanted poster. So she's headed in that direction, and shortly after that, though, shortly after she took an interest in Arlong, that's when she went and grabbed the treasure and took off. So these two are putting two and two together, and then figuring, okay, that's where she's going. So then he's trying to explain that that Arlong is he's just this badass and everything. And in between this whole thing, when they're talking about this giant terror and this fish and everything, Luffy holds up another picture and says, "How about, is this one any better?" And Sanji, who's totally in love with Nami, he's just talking about Nami and he hears about mermaids and all this other stuff, because they were talking about some other areas of the Grand Line and famous areas. And at any rate, Luffy holds up this other one and he says, "What about this?" And he goes, "That's just the picture you just drew, just standing up, So then he says something about, Sanji says something about, oh, maybe Nami's a mermaid. She's beautiful enough to be one. Because if you remember, he was kind of taken with her back on the Baratier when she was still there, 20, 25 chapters ago. So Luffy goes and then he writes Nami on the picture of the fish, and shows it to Sanji, and Sanji he goes, "Oh, I'm going to kill you," he's all angry. So the bottom line is that we find out that we're going to Arlong Park, and they're in his waters now, and basically Arlong is a pretty bad dude. He makes Don Krieg look like a pussycat, are Yosaku's words. So Luffy and Sanji are just kind of like, whatever. They don't even care. They just sort of blow him off. And Yosaku's just like, "Did you guys hear a word I said?" And Luffy's like, yeah, fishman, mean, And he's like, "No, you don't understand. I mean, how his strength is unmatched and unparalleled." And he's just like, "Well, whatever. We'll see when we get there. Now it's time to eat." So Sanji goes and asks him what they want to eat, and Luffy says, "Meat on a bone." And he loves his meat. And Yosaku wants some bean sprouts. And so anyway, that's how the first kind of half of the chapter ends. Maybe it's a little more than half, and I know I went pretty in depth on it, but there was a lot of information they gave as far as with the Seven Warlords, and just we just finally got a little bit of insight into some of the things that'll await us on the Grand Line. So the second half opens up, and we see almost immediately we're introduced to Arlong, Captain Arlong of the Arlong Pirates. But first we see a brief exchange. It appears to be a bribe of sorts between the captain of Navy Base 16, Captain Nezumi. And again, there's a brief exchange between them of money, and then we're introduced to Arlong. And he's this kind of cool-looking, grotesque sort of fish guy with this sawtooth nose, like a swordfish type nose, and the bottom line is he's he basically is telling Captain Nezumi, "Hey, you should stick around and have a couple of drinks." The captain's like trying to excuse himself real quick now that business is done, and he's like, "Listen, it doesn't look good for a patrol ship to be docked here overnight, so I got to get going." So he then goes, and we're introduced very briefly to Hachi, his first mate, and he says he's going to take him in the octopus pot, back to tow him back to his ship, and that's what he does. He gets in there, and then and Hachi goes and says something to him about, "Oh, you have a fitting face. It makes me chuckle. It's like a mouse," and he kind of smiles, and Arlong basically says, "Shut up, keep that quiet," and then he says, "Oh, sorry about that, Captain." He says, "Oh, okay, no harm done." So that brief exchange happens, and really it's just, I think, to kind of introduce us to and show us, Arlong. And then we go and we see outside of this compound or wherever they're in over there, wherever they were meeting, we see a girl walk up, and there's a girl standing there, and there's a boy behind her saying, "Get out of my way, I'm going to kill Arlong. He killed my father." And she goes and just pulls out a stick, and we see it's Nami, and she's in a nice dress, and she just whacks him across the head and busts him upside the head and gives him some money and says, "Just, be gone with you." And we're kind of thinking, what the hell is going on here, So this is where Nami went, right? And she's, like I said, she has changed. She has a dress on. So she goes and kind of, as she's walking into the place, she goes, okay, the complex is unguarded as usual, but I guess who would think to attack the, the mighty Arlong? So she comes in the last couple of pages, she walks up and we can see that everyone knows her, because Arlong goes and says, oh, look who's back, right? And they introduce her as Nami, first officer of Arlong's crew. And they show that her tattoo is actually, Arlong's flag symbol, which is the, it looks like a fish, basically, or like a, I don't know, almost looks like a seahorse, but then it's got the sawtooth nose. And you're like, what the? Are you kidding me? So what's the deal with Nami, right? So there is a brief exchange between them, where he's basically like, you've been gone for a while and this and that. How is your haul? And she says, oh, it's great, but I feel kind of empty inside. And he's like, well, what, you've been reading poetry? And so we can tell that she's some kind of, whether she's working for him or pretending to work for him or she's in some kind of debt to him. Basically, that's what she does. She goes out on these trips and screws people over and steals from them and then brings the loot, it looks like, back to Arlong. So we then go and we kind of see a little shot real quick before the end of the chapter of Usopp and Zoro. And they're kind of looking over the top of it. I think it's Usopp and Zoro, if I'm correct. I might be mistaken. It might be Usopp and Johnny, but either way, it's two of them over there, and they're looking over the wall, and they're like, "What? Nami's in there?" That's what Usopp says, and they're thinking, "Oh man," So they've obviously followed her there. And then it goes and it kind of shows a zoomed out, one-page panel of it says Arlong Park. So this is obviously where the main area that the next arc is going to take place, and certainly it's kind of cool because we did get a lot of information overall in this chapter, and then of course being introduced to this new, I'm assuming villain of a character, and then of course too, I'd like to find out and know what the hell is going on with Nami over here. So I really want to like the character, but I don't know. I guess we'll see, right, in the next one. So let me know what you think, Nation, in the comments down below. Feel free to hit that the like button if you think I deserve it, and subscribe, of course, if you haven't done so already. We will look forward to catching you in the next one, Nation. As always, thank you for watching, brothers and sisters. Be sure to subscribe and take a look at some of my other videos. Thanks. See you next time, Nation.